If you haven't seen this video yet, please do before watching this one. It shows what I'll be doing with these death battle rankings, how I've been doing them, how far I currently am, and other information that I may or may not be referencing in this video. Death Battle has officially finished another season as of now, and it might just be their best yet. Look, I say might because I don't know how this season is going to hold up yet, but I do know this. It's not a surprise that this season is at the very least one of the best they've ever done, so why wouldn't I want to watch it and then post my ranking on it if this was such an amazing year for Death Battle? It was the first season that I watched all the way through as well, so it also is somewhat special to me. I only just started watching the show during the waiting period for Bond vs. Rick, so it was already halfway through season 9, so I didn't necessarily have any special attachment to that season. Other than making an episode that will probably stay in my top 5 of all time for a good while. But anyways, if it wasn't obvious enough from the title of the video already, then I will be ranking every episode of Death Battle Season 10. I have just about as much stake in the analysis as I do the animation, so I will be reviewing the full episode. So expect long reviews, that's why this video is probably going to be 3 hours as long after all. I'm also going to rank this from worst to best and not a retrospective. It might make sense to do the latter because it shows stuff that has happened in the season over time, but this allows me to express my opinions more directly. Rather than you having to wait to see what last place is, it just starts out with that right off the bat for me. Who wins or who loses also doesn't matter to me. If they have the verdict wrong by their own logic, I might still be more lenient than other people, but if the conclusion is comically bad, then I might have to comment on it and dock points from it. But thankfully, there's no episodes like that in this season. At least conclusions that aren't comically bad. They're still wrong by their own logic, apparently. But yeah, that's all I have to say about the rules. This will be the first Death Battle ranking I will release. The first competent Death Battle ranking I will release. So feel free to give me any criticisms. Grab a snack and drink because this will be a long-ass video. And I hope you enjoy it because I worked really hard on this. So anyway, let's start out with Phoenix versus Raven and then slowly make our way up to the top spot.
You die!
Oh my god, this boss is bullshit!
What? Did I say Phoenix versus Raven? Sorry, I meant this. But anyway, it sucks, I hate it. It's one of the worst in the series. In fact, the worst. It sucks so fucking much. The name does. It should have been called Chosen Undead versus Last Dragonborn. Even if they want to use the series as a title like Pokemon vs. Digimon or Power Rangers vs. Voltron, at least make the order correct. Whoever is analyzed first goes first in the title, but Skyrim was analyzed second, yet it's first in the title. See why it sucks so much now? The title, I mean. The actual episode is really good, but we'll get to it later.
Oh, have you not heard? It was my understanding that everyone had heard.
Heard what? Bryan, don't!
Oh, well, a bad, bad, bad. Well, a bad, bad, bad.
Phoenix vs. Raven is the worst episode of the season, which I'm going to assume that will be because, come on, it's Phoenix vs. Raven. And that alone should speak volumes of the quality of this season. It's not an episode that I don't really like, it's not an episode that I fucking hate, it's not even an episode that has a mixed bag and is kind of mid for me. It is straight up a good episode. Not a great episode, but still a good one. But being the worst still means it's the worst, so I have more issues with it than anything in this season. The first one being, why is this episode even a thing? The matchup isn't really that good at all. On the wiki it says that the connections are both are superheroes that have something to do with birds and have magic/psychic abilities. And I guess they fit, but those connections aren't exactly the most interesting for me. Even if I was, there would be massive amounts of missed potential anyway, because it's not like we've had these cosmic reality warping fights before, am I right? That's not the only thing. In regards to their power sets, Phoenix is comparable to Scarlet Witch, Raven is comparable to Satana, and I wonder who fought each other last season. So if we had something like that last season, it would just be repetitive, and it being a watered down version of it doesn't help it either. That's honestly how I would describe this episode in general. A diet Wanda versus Satana. Anyway, let's see why I think that. The analyses are honestly fine. I wasn't too interested in everything, but there was some good stuff, and given that it was a comic book episode, it had great editing to keep my attention. Alright, I think we all know that's just not true. How do you like my line? Was I good? Was I bad? But that's at least what I wish I could say about the editing, because it was definitely the worst of the season. After coming off of ones like Ant-Man vs. Adam and others from all the way back to even Season 7, I expected it to be pretty amazing, but it wasn't. I'm not blaming the editor for doing a bad job, it wasn't a bad job, it was alright. But swap this out for a Season 5 to 6 comic book episode and the quality of the edits would blend right in. Because this one just had the same thing and moving to a different comic book panel, then another one, and it just kept going on and on and on and on. Like you see how that would just be dull. But my favorite edit was of all the times that Jean Grey died, and yes, that is how high the bar is going. I wasn't that interested in the Versus stuff either, like all the stupidly overpowered comic book heralds, but I didn't have too many complaints in either analysis at least besides that. Everything in Jean's was fine, barring the storytelling anyways. I liked the events that they cover, like the origin story, how she emerged with the Phoenix, how she dealt with her trauma, and all that. But once they get to the feats, it is absolutely boring. I did like some of the jokes at least. You'll see me have my take on this later, but this was how to do the music cuts right. Instead of doing it constantly, it was only used for 1 or 2 jokes per analysis, and the music was cut way less abruptly. Even if I did take issue with it in this episode, I couldn't ignore how funny the jokes were. It had Wiz and Boomstick talking about the weird stuff that Jean's been through, Marvel Girl making fun of the guy who can climb good, them calling her a Dark Souls boss, the kind of funny cutaway, and by far the funniest joke of the episode. How lucky do you have to be for the timing to be that flawless? Anyways, anything else to say? The way her rundown started and ended was kind of cool. Alright, let's just talk about Ravens now. It also exists. My thoughts on the Egg and Versus stuff is the same as with Jeans, which does mean there's not too much to talk about, but it isn't as bad in terms of the Versus stuff. Because it was at least kind of interesting learning about the pre-crisis Superman, and it didn't have as much omniversal scaling shenanigans. I don't think her story was as interesting, however. I did criticize Jean's story, but that was only because boring Versus stuff correlated with it. And while it isn't the case here, they didn't make her relationship seem as interesting to me. They talk about her relationship with Trigon and her friends, but what makes me like Jean's way more is that Wiz and Boomstick directly talk about her relationship with the Phoenix, aka her source of power. It just made it way more interesting to me. There were some good jokes too, like the one about the prequel trilogy, that one was really funny. The Superman catchphrase and Raven vs. Twilight callback were kind of cute. It had the better cutaway. The references to Edgar Allan Poe's poems fit, given her name. Boomstick's random, that's just bad game design, wasn't really prompted, but it was still funny. Okay, you could probably tell that the analyses didn't really give me much to work with, so let's just get to the fight already. I was interested to see how well it aged, because initially I wasn't excited for this episode, but once I saw the fight, I fucking loved it. So surely I would still love it, right? I would still love it, right? Well, I do like it, but it definitely has fallen from grace for me. The choreography isn't as good as I remember it being either, at least for the first part. There is the birds fight syncing up with the track, but then there's Raven weaponizing the place she's trying to protect. What? I mean, I don't mind it, but it still screams out of character. There's the You Don't Control My Mind scene, where the spinning animation just looks weird. So does Raven's running animation in the sword slice. By the way, they don't even mention her sword in the analysis verbally, like, at all. So, yeah, it's not off to the best start. That's in regards to its choreography, because I think this fight looks and sounds amazing. The best aspects of the fight, for sure. The background isn't one of my favorites of the season, but I do love the architecture of Azarath and the pink sky that accompanies it. The hand-drawn stuff, on the other hand, is some of the best that the season has. Raven's soul self already looked good enough in her previous episode, but look at this! It has a way cooler shade of black, it moves around more freely, the design of the wings are also cooler. I'm astounded with how good this turned out. Raven wasn't the only one who got amazing hand-drawn stuff, because Jean's Phoenix looks even better. There are some scenes with it that just look too good with it, I swear. She also got the smooth as hell transition from hand-drawn to sprites, not to mention that the hand-drawn close-up just looks smooth in general. Forevermore definitely isn't one of the more memorable tracks of the season, but it's still a good listen. I like the inclusion of the iconic X-Men 90s cartoon, while still having its own identity. It also syncs up to parts of the fight, and I will never not appreciate that. Like the bird fight at the start, like I already said. But that does mean it is kind of weird to listen to on its own, because it's just one of those tracks where it's meant to go along with the fight instead of listening to it on its own. The voice acting is great too. Kira Buckland reprises Raven amazingly. She definitely had better material to work with in the script this time around, and sounds a lot more like the character than she did before. She also gets in my favorite line in the fight with the Bass Afraid of the Dark scene. What impressed me even more was Corey Pett's Jean Grey. She apparently had stitches in her mouth while recording her lines. I might have liked her lines and voice less than some of the Ravens, but that alone is just super commendable. Besides, she does get some great lines like, "Let me scorch you all away," "You don't control my mind," and while I don't like the delivery on the word pure, the rest of the line before she takes her to the White Hot Room was cool. Not to mention her calling out to her friends was a cool final line. Only problem is that I just wish she voiced in a better episode than this if she's this good of a voice actress, like seriously. Who knows, maybe she'll get the chance to voice act in an episode that I love way more than other people do one day. Anyways, while the first half of the fight's choreography wasn't as good as it could have been, everything after the sword slice is great. Dark Phoenix's transformation is amazing, with her screams of pain transitioning into laughs of pleasure super well, and the moon scene is the best scene in the entire animation, and the sole reason that I say that the choreography doesn't suck, and I'm not going to choose to think about that point right now. The wide shot of Raven looking up at the Phoenix is amazing, and just like another background I'll talk about later, and another background I'll talk about even later than that, this is literally wallpaper material. Jean making clones of herself to shoot fire at Raven was cool to see, and Raven enlarging the moon to kill all of them was also very creative. Then there's a slow motion scene, and then the quality dips sadly. For one, why was the slow motion scene even here? It was apparently used for dramatic effect, but it doesn't work and halts the pacing of the fight. Speaking of fight, that was the last scene of fighting, because there was borderline no fighting afterwards. All that happens is that both absorb each other's energies. There's an admittedly cool explosion after Dark Phoenix is purified, but to balance out, there's the awful death. I wish I could like it like I used to, because when I watched it for the first time, I thought it was hype as hell and thought the death was pretty good. And I love both their final lines too, especially Raven's. But once you give the death a single ounce of thought, you realize how much it sucks. Instead of an epic beam struggle or something, the fire blast Jean was firing just disappears and the Phoenix does fuck all. I do like Raven's final line though. The conclusion, however, is fine. But is it just me or is it the worst one of the season? Not that they did a bad job arguing the verdict, but just feels so forgettable. And the Marvel and DC cosmology will never get me interested. This episode definitely isn't worse than the season material, but for this season in particular, it just might be. It's just missing something. Because every Marvel vs. DC fight that I like more than this has something more compelling to watch, whether it be character's personality, character discussion I love, better action, or anything else. Wanda vs. Zatanna gets those first things down to a T, which is why I ultimately like it more, and this is just the diet version. And those three compelling things are present in not just every Marvel vs. DC fights that I like more than this, but Season 10 as a whole. And since those things are present here but to a lesser degree, why should I give it the privilege of it being higher than any episode in this season? It's certainly not a bad episode, it's good, but my pick for the worst episode of Season 10. What if I find an episode worse than this before the season's over? That would just be embarrassing. Because, I literally labeled it as the worst one. That would just be stupid.
It's time for the death battle you've been asking for forever!
So remember hearing that line from Phoenix vs. Raven? That line being, what if I find an episode that's worse than it, and it would be embarrassing? Well, guess what? I almost did. Yeah, sorry, but I still can't get into Galactus vs. Unicron. I do prefer it to Phoenix vs. Raven a bit, but it sucks that this was one of the lowest points of the season for me. If you watch my reaction video for this episode, I still held the same opinion on it. I was thinking, and even saying out loud during that video, oh, I hope this doesn't pull a Thanos vs. Darkseid. And by the end of watching the video, I thought it pulled a Thanos vs. Darkseid.
it disappointed me. Especially because this was even stated by the team that it was the #1 most requested death battle ever. I wasn't excited for this matchup or anything. I wanted it to happen, but just didn't have connections to either series. But I did know for a fact that this matchup was finale worthy, and it could have been one of the best episodes of all time if it was done right. But with the final product that we were given, it does not feel like a finale at all. Especially with the episode directly before it feeling way more like a finale, which I'll be elaborating later once I get to that segment. But unlike Thanos vs. Darkseid, I actually like this one. It has some good qualities to it, great moments, but it is kind of carried by one aspect that I'll get to later. This was Liam Swan's first time directing a finale. I don't remember if it was his first time directing an episode. It probably isn't, but this is what Ben saw on the Death Battle cast, so I thought I might as well bring it up in this video. So not only was he writing it, he was also directing it. And we all know and love him, and we've seen him write amazing scripts before. So I was really excited to see how these analyses were going to end up being. So of course these analyses were some of my least favorites of the season. They're not bad. I won't even say any rundown in this season is bad, but they're just not interesting. And I know someone has already made this point, but I feel like I need to bring it up too because it helps me explain my opinion on the rundowns. I also think Liam Swan is an overhyped writer. It's not that his writing is bad, it's just that he has written so many episodes. And most of them are good, yeah, that's true. But not all of them are amazing. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? I feel like the people that praise Liam Swan a bunch are just looking at those amazing episodes when his episodes are, like, on average are like 7, 8 out of 10 worthy. Like, look, I don't want to downplay him too much because I don't want to insult the guy. In fact, I really like him as a writer. He's like an amazing writer. I aspire to be like him when writing myself. But he really should stop writing half the season. And it's episodes like this, Phoenix vs. Raven, and number 13 on this list that make me think that. Because him having this much on his workload, in my opinion, is hindering his writing quality in some of these episodes. Like, have Lousy write some more, have Joshua write some more, have Ultra Guy write some more, have DJ write some more. I don't understand why he has to write that much. I don't think it's good for him. And I say all this because the analyses honestly don't have much to talk about. Or maybe I will find a lot to talk about because this script is almost 50,000 words and this is the last main segment. Who knows? With analyses' greatest strengths were how well written some of it was. But it's not changing the spot it's ranked at because there are only bits and pieces of it in either one. Like at the beginning of Galactus' rundown, there is this really immersive storytelling, that being the what is the true nature of evil monologue that Wiz has, and I think that's really cool. And you'd probably think that the rundowns would be even more well written after this, right? Nope, that is honestly the peak of the episode's well written lines. There are a few things that get close, at least, so there's that. Like both their ending lines and other examples that I'm thinking of probably. But once the nature of evil thing was mentioned, literally nothing topped it. But still has good writing, so not that I'm complaining or anything. On topic of good writing, there were some jokes that I liked in Galactus' rundown. It had Boomstick's delivery of,
How do I turn this goddamn spaceship around?
him saying, hate it when that happens, when the universe was getting destroyed, the good cutaway, and my favorite one of the episode with a line about the Happy Meal. But it's not always perfect. Sometimes the jokes land, and other times they do not. But probably my favorite part of his analysis were the discussion about his powers. Force of Nature antagonists are probably my least favorite of the villain archetypes. That's likely why I didn't care about his character discussion that much. But benefit from being one is that every single action you take is intimidating. And seeing just exactly what he could do, like how being near him can literally warp your sense of reality, was really cool to see. That's honestly the basis of the versus stuff in this rundown, really. As for anything else that stuck out to me, I liked how they went over his physiology, that was pretty cool. But I can't say I found the same appreciation for the versus stuff in Unicron's rundown. I liked how they covered how when Unicron dies, he just respawns in another universe. That isn't on the same level of the versus stuff in Galactus is. Yeah, he drove an entire plan saved by his mere presence, but still isn't in the same league as what Galactus could do. And honestly, there isn't much to talk about here either. I like the music that they used at the start. I feel like he was at least described to be more intimidating, so at least there's that. And there aren't any lame jokes, unlike the ones in Galactus' rundown. Aside from maybe Boomstick treating Unicron like a dog, that one wasn't that funny. But while there aren't any unfunny jokes, there is a confusing one, that being the cutaway. Who was this man who gave birth to Maru Simna? I'm not over the age of 40, so I never heard of the name Orson Welles or the movie Citizen Kane until I had to look it up for this video. He just wasn't a household name for me, and I don't think it was for any kid born in the 2000s. But there were at least some good jokes, even better than the ones in Galactus's, like Boomstick's siblings putting him in a dryer, the delivery of Unicron again by Boomstick, and him being defeated by the power of friendship. But these analyses don't have too much to talk about, like I said. The fight, however, also has not too much to talk about, sadly, but here I can at least say stuff about the episode I really like. This fight is the best looking one of the show by a landslide. Better than Jack vs. Afro, better than Ganondorf vs. Dracula, better than Harley Quinn vs. Jinx, better than Sauron vs. Lich King, and even better than Bill vs. Discord. I don't like this one nearly as much as any of them, but if you say that Galactus vs. Unicron is worse than those on a visual standpoint, then you're literally blind. The malls here are so highly detailed. Some people complain in other 3D episodes about how the malls are too shiny. That's kind of the point for Unicrons, and also one of the reasons I love these malls so much to begin with. When you see it fighting, you don't really notice it, but when you see it up close, you can see just the absurd amount of detail put into it. The main example being his initial transformation scene. And that scene is also just good on its own. It does go on probably longer than it should, just like the Golden Frieza transformation, though unlike that one, this one has quicker cuts to go by faster, so at least has that to compensate for it. But shots like these are why I'd like to say that this is one of the most cinematic fights of the whole season. A bunch of shots here just have a sense of grandeur and awe that I can't really put into words. It just feels straight out of a movie. In fact, some of the visuals that go along with them look better than some movies in general, especially with the beautifully looking and well-colored background. It might just start out as normal space at first with nothing special, but once it gets past that, it goes to this gorgeous looking black star thing, and it gets a lot more vibrant towards the end with all the galaxies around each other. And I point out all these positives with the visuals because it all contributes to my favorite scene of the whole episode.
Fleeing so readily, Unicron, no devourer, transforming.
That looks badass and is badass with the dialogue that it has. I've heard that Unicron is out of character. I don't know how exactly, all I remember is that he apparently is, but I do like most of his lines. Most of his lines. We'll get to you later. But otherwise, Brent Mukai does a good job as Unicron, even though it's not as good as his previous role. And Wolf Williams does also a good job as Galactus, but I don't really have that strong of an opinion on him. The same goes for the track All Consuming, but I do still kind of like it. It helps emphasize the cinematic feel of the fight by having it feel ancient and primeval, and it's essentially a better version of Kings of Infinity because this time it's still intimidating, but it doesn't drag on. Alright, now since I brought it up in some way, now it's time for the comparisons between this and Thanos vs. Darkseid. Say what you want about that episode, I don't care, but I've seen several people say that this fight is basically Thanos vs. Darkseid if it was good. And I can see why they say that. It's a better looking fight, it seemed like way more effort was put into it, All Consuming is better than Kings of Infinity in my opinion, and there was less potential being wasted. How's it in terms of the actual choreography? Well, it is better, but I sadly still don't find it too interesting. Which sucks because there are actually some good moments in there. The choreography has the same structure as Vader vs. Doom, but here instead of the first part being good and the second part sucking, it's just that the first part is good and the second part is underwhelming. As for the good stuff, I like Unicron's I am Oblivion as he knees Galactus in the face, Galactus throwing a giant backhand into the sun, Unicron using a black hole like Brass Knuckles was really creative, and so is the beam struggle where Galactus' body is the beam? Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that one. But I do know how I feel about some of the other moments and how I don't really care about them. Like there was a shot where Unicron swung his Energon sword, and there was existence being erased behind him, but it's kind of hard to see and I didn't even know about it until someone pointed it out. There was also the scene where Unicron uses Mars to grab range onto Galactus because he should not have been able to grab him from that far away. The white ball sound effect is also off-sync by an entire second, and then that honestly brings me to talk about the next point. Like the other Transformers episode in this season, I don't really care about what abilities are being used in the fight. Sure, maybe there's some wasted potential, but why should I care if I don't care about their abilities? How sometimes I didn't even know what the powers were. At least with other episodes where I had this issue, I at least knew what abilities they were using. Like, what's this white ball here? Where is it mentioned in the analysis? And I just don't like how the escalation in the fight went. It's one of those things because since it's a cosmic fight, it feels like the fight doesn't go anywhere because they're already at the highest point it can go to. Yes, their attacks are causing the universe to shake during the tail end of the fight, but that they're already fighting in space anyway, aka the universe. But at least there are some good shots after Unicron's second transformation. Like when they're shaking the universe, they basically had an entire rap battle with each other. It's a dynamic that I really like, even if I've heard that Unicron isn't the type of character to do this. But I'm going to defend it anyway and say that it's kind of fitting. Not for Unicron, I don't really know him, so I don't have the right to comment on that. But I'm talking about how they've been speaking to each other the entire fight. It's vague, but notice how they were talking before they started rapping towards each other. It's sort of like the talk that you hear in the Bible, like, you know, thee, thy, I am thou, and thou art I, all that stuff. And you can kind of see those words in poetry, which is this dynamic's main theme is. But after that, there's a couple of scenes that are good eye candy, but just aren't the most interesting. Like Galactus throwing all the galaxies at Unicron having no impact, and then him blocking Unicron's Energon beam in. Wow, that's a breathtaking shot. Then there's the ending, and it just sucks, man. So I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, the Ultimate Nullifier is literally the goofiest thing I've ever seen. Like, look at this. Does this look like a last resort or an ultimate weapon to you? And look how tiny it is. At least make it seem threatening, because since it's so small, I couldn't even see it being turned around and being shot at Galactus. Like, what if, say, it was big enough for Galactus to actually hold it properly, just speaking hypothetically? How much more cooler would it be if Unicron possesses the Nullifier that way, tries to force it in his direction by flipping it, because it's big enough to do that now, show Galactus actually resisting it instead of doing nothing, and then shooting him with it? Like, think of that one scene from Winter Soldier vs. Red Hood. That's what I'm talking about. That would have been way cooler than what we actually got. But that's not the only bad thing about the ending either. Unicron has a quirky one-liner saying, "Finally, I've won." Would you be surprised if I told you he ended up losing directly after he said that? And let's just imagine he said nothing for a second. Let's just give it the benefit of the doubt. It would still suck because there would be no tension, as Galactus' analysis literally said that he can resist the effects of the Ultimate Nullifier. But while I dislike the ending, I can't really say the same about the death. It isn't excellent or anything, but it has the music becoming heroic, the vaporization death, and the cherry on top with Galactus' final speech, and pose with the galaxy in his hand. And the conclusion is sadly nothing special. I don't remember anything inherently wrong with it, but there were so many good conclusions before this one, and I feel nothing. The more I wrote about this episode, specifically the fight, I realized I probably liked this more than I thought I would. But with what semi-good highs this episode has, it has lows, and it's just disappointing to me. I do like it despite it being kind of carried by looks, but still. What a shame for like a finale that everyone has been hyped for. I mean, other people probably did like it, but I just sadly can't really be part of that group. I mean, I do like it, but I don't love it.
Your power next to mine is like an anthill next to a mountain.
Ant-Man vs. Atom is pretty overlooked in my opinion. Of course it isn't going to stand out much in the currently most stacked season of Death Battle history, or, stand out at all. But I've seen so many people just give it a 6 out of 10 and just think it's nothing special, which kind of bums me out. Like, I think the match was pretty good. Of the 3 Marvel vs. DC episodes that happened this season, this was the only one where I wasn't pissed off over it happening, and actually was kind of excited for it. And that's because this is one of the last ones that needed to be done. Like, seriously, I don't understand how Black Adam vs. Apocalypse or gender-bent Batman vs. Spider-Man happened before this one did. I don't have that strong of an opinion on it or anything, but I still do think it's a pretty good episode, and has its own qualities specific to it that some other Marvel vs. DC ones don't have. Recent ones have amazing acting, but this is just on a whole other level. Yes, there's Ray's comically awful walk cycle, if I can look past that, and I gotta give props to the actor for even attempting something like that at all. And there's plenty of other good acting tricks there too. Too many to count even. Ray has some other ones like him being stuck in the cave and everything to do with that one chair shrinking, and so is Hank with him being made fun of in that one screen with the bore radius. They have came a long way since Red Hood vs. Winter Soldier, I'll tell you that much. That here might have actually been better than Lex vs. Doom and Batman vs. Iron Man. That's how good I think they are. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, the analyses definitely have one of my favorite ads of the season. Are the analyses here some of my favorites of the season overall? Probably not, but they're still good enough. If I had to choose, I would probably say that I enjoyed Hank's rundown more.
The jokes were about as good as either analysis, but he definitely got the better end of the deal in regards to the story coverage. They talk about how smart he was, how he created the pin particles, and what he's done in Invader over the years. What really makes this better than Ray's story coverage for me is the way they talk about his mental health. The writer obviously had to walk on eggshells with that one infamous comic book panel, and I think they chose the best option here. I'm also so glad that this wasn't in one of the earlier seasons, because Boomstick probably would have been like, LOL, he's a wife beater, and it wouldn't have done that comic book panel justice. Just like if they passed it off as an effect of poor mental health. That would be a big no-no. So I'm glad with how the writer dealt with it in here, saying how it doesn't excuse a horrible act like that. Of course there's some other story coverage regarding Hank, but that was a major part of it and I thought it needed to be included in the review. Besides, that's only half of my favorite story beat in his rundown. Talking about how he made his comeback after his lowest point has given me some of the most happiness I felt in any comic book analysis. It's very similar to Harley's analysis from Season 9, and you'll know how much I loved her character discussion when we roll around to that season. But to balance out Hank's depression and that horrible drawing, there are some pretty good jokes, like the ant puns, Wiz and Boomstick arguing over how Hank's shrinking works, which even leads into the cutaway where the latter insults the former in a funny way, and even calls back to Wiz's interesting discussion about the bore radius. That was clever. The versus stuff isn't super in your face, which is appreciated. I really love how his rundown flows into his ending line, but other than that, there isn't too much else to talk about. Ray's analysis, on the other hand, was decent too, but like I said, not as good. I don't know why I think that exactly, but I could probably trace it back to his story coverage not being as well structured. Aside from his superhero name and series that he was from, I didn't know about the Atom at all, so his backstory was certainly more interesting to me. I like how it isn't some backstory about his father dying or super dramatic and just being kind of like a Sunday comic you would read in the 50s. But that's honestly the only advantage that his rundown has over Hank's in terms of story coverage. After his backstory, he rather has a bunch of side stories, which I did like, but didn't flow as well. I'm not going to pretend that Hank didn't have this either, but while his side stories tied into his character, Ray's just tied into versus stuff, which I didn't really care about. All that they talk about Ray's character is that he's smart. Granted, I did like the examples that the writer put to show exactly how smart he was, especially because he didn't really show that many examples in the fight. The jokes were pretty good too. I liked how Doomsday called the Kartarthans Kardashians and being obsessed over exploding shit, and the bit about Adam's actual name. I don't get why that one Rooster Teeth employee was name dropped, but okay, I guess. The fight is neat too, but isn't devoid of problems. I do like the set, but it's honestly just an inferior one to Lex vs. Doom for me. But it still works well enough. Ray being interested in some sort of science-related concept that he doesn't know about seemed in character for him. I don't know if it would be in character enough to break into someone else's property, but that's a concession I'm willing to make. If it isn't in character, let me know in the comments, I guess. Hank gets in a couple of good lines before the fight actually starts, like the "you should knocked" bit, and him bragging about being Scientist Supreme, which is something that he said he did in his analysis. And this is a good segue into talking about the voice acting, or more specifically, the characterization. I honestly expected to put this higher than some of the other Marvel vs. DC fights, but just bogs it down for me is that unlike some of the other ones, I just don't like listening to these two. I don't actively hate the portrayals, but it doesn't leave the same level of charisma as Zatanna or Booster Gold, the same level of badass as Batman or Black Adam, the same level of evil as Apocalypse, etc. If one of them had a really good character portrayal, it could have probably become my favorite Marvel vs. DC fight that happened after Season 7. Hell, maybe I could have even bumped the episode's score up. Point is, it's just kind of memorable for me. Thankfully, the actual fighting isn't, but the keyword here is memorable. It's not always good and can sometimes be bad. Such as the start with the fight, which is kind of rough. I like them punching and shrinking at the same time, akin to something along the lines of Green Arrow vs. Hawkeye. Everything between that and before they fall off the desk isn't exactly the greatest, or is even kind of bad. Like Ray punching Hank, which looks really awful. The wind-up, the impact, the position his hand is in after the punch, all of it. Then there's this unintentionally hilarious shot of Hank looking up at the dipping bird with his hand sticking out. I like Hank using the Moon's Cradle to sneak attack Ray, but I just don't really get the dialogue exchange when they're running through all of the metal balls. It's always been kind of confusing to me. I don't really like the angle for the shot, and given that I wasn't really accustomed to the voices yet, and the fact that they kind of sound similar to begin with, instead of thinking that was them talking to each other, I thought it was just one of them saying a couple of sentences. Even taking that out, I just don't really like the dialogue exchange that much in the first place. It was cool to see Hank determining that Ray was using the White Dwarf Star despite only being hit by his fist once, but then there's Ray's line. It has never really made any sense to me. If I'm right, it's him insulting Hank by implying he's smarter than him. That's kind of cool, I guess, but the way it's worded is just so weird. It part of the desk is flawed, yeah, but I still love the animators including something like this at all. If the team did another fight where the combats interacted with huge set pieces like that, but better, then that would make me really happy. I don't really have to worry about any other major flaws in the fight because after that it picks up a lot. The zoom out with the balls is funny and I like how it cuts right before the impact, and so is Hank stepping on red. Once they get down to the floor, you can see the gap in quality between this part and the first. They use a lot of abilities as well after the first part, so I don't really have any wasted potential to complain about either. Hank states a fact which you can see he gets wrong in the errors tagged on the episode's wiki page, and then there's a cool scene with him summoning the ants. Ray slicing the ants with his sword isn't as cool as I want it to be, but it's still decent enough. After that, I like the expression he makes once he kills him, making him look like he's done with the Hank shit at that point. Not to mention him stepping in loser was funny. I guess I mean winner in this case. Once Ray's finished dealing with the ants, Hank is just chilling by his desk, which is honestly kind of lame. How sick would it have been if Hank had an I've been on the beach the whole time tier moment? But no, he's just standing there. Is it because it requires time to get the pin particles ready? No, because Hank can generate them naturally. So what gives? There are some good things about this scene though. I like how the bio belt made Ray immune to the size alteration, and because that did nothing, Hank alters the size of the car instead. The next scene, on the other hand, doesn't really make any sense. I know that Ray was being hit by a car, but was that really enough to give him the reason to go subatomic? He could have probably just shrank normally and he would have been good. The thing that makes even less sense is how Hank got caught, but not his ant. The ant saying Yas Queen was kind of funny, but if you take a look at both Hank and the ant in this shot, they're about the same size. Is it because he didn't think the ant would be a problem? Well, that's stupid. Adam, buddy, you're Ray fucking Palmer, probably one of the most intelligent people in all of DC Comics. Take this advice from me and don't be as careless next time. I really do love the subatomic fight that they have though. They obviously had to squeeze one in there given the matchup in question. The background also looks really nice and vibrant, which I appreciate, but since there aren't any set pieces to compare their sizes to, I can't say it's as visually appealing as the lab. But this is when the music starts to transition from something like Buster into something great. Not actual size, despite the boring name, is a good track, but when both of them were fighting in the lab, it really wasn't. It had the same problem that Webbed Wings had, where it was just mainly one of the combat's theme and had no influence on the other one. Well, thank God it didn't continue that path, because Fight as One started playing and that track became a certified banger. The gunfight after that is pretty good. I liked Ray flying towards the gun even if they never animated him dodging the lasers for some reason. And then there's another part of the fight that I really like. I've seen more than a few people say that Hank gets a lot more moments to show off his intelligence than Ray. Okay, that one's true, but I've also seen a lot of people say that Hank completely overshadows him in that regard, which I don't really agree with. Sure, he does get more moments, but I wouldn't say that Ray gets shafted, especially because I like the moments where they do get to show off their intelligence in equal amounts, and Ray has exactly that. Like him disabling Hank's gun, surprising him with a nuclear blast, which I'm glad to see was worked in, and my favorite moment where Ray changes his density to tank the hit, and then he throws Hank across the battlefield. I'm glad the ending went the way it did as well. The music goes hard, they somehow work in a kaiju fight, which is impressive given that one of them can't even grow above his normal size, and there are some ironically funny expressions like Ray shitting himself when he reaches his limit, and the motion that Hank makes when he says, human existence. But there's definitely more to speech in that one stupid motion because his monologue was genuinely badass, and so was the reveal of the ants destroying the belt. And then there's the death. Oh my god, the death. I love so many endings throughout this season 1. Of course I would. It's season 10 of all seasons. In regards to the actual death, this is the best of them all and it's not even close. Rockets is still phenomenal, but like, look at this dude. The music gets serene. Ray's mind is genuinely blown at seeing this. Ray can't even think of what to say. But then Hank says something with his Giant Man costume on, which is a nice detail, and the delivery of his line was so amazing. And that's just the build up to the death. Once it happens, the music picks up again, the death screen is phenomenal, and Ray dies with ants coming out of his body, and his mind is getting literally blown. Destroyed. Any other destructive synonym. Not to mention that this kill is just super creative and well drawn in general. As I said, Ray gets torn up by ants. Fitting, I know, but still, how do you come up with that shit? I'm not even going to address the problem of not showing exactly how he got to overspace. This is my favorite death of the season and I'm dying on that hill. The conclusion isn't one of the weaker or stronger ones in the season. I wasn't really interested to hear what they had to say about the verdict, but it was definitely one of the funner ones to listen to because they surprisingly had some good jokes in there. The return of the ant punch was nice to see, they referenced the Thanos ass meme, and it ends the ongoing bit of my favorite joke in the episode. Of course, this episode isn't going to stand out that much considering it's season 10, but this is still a solid one. And the fact that I could complain about that much in the fight and still like it should show how much I love it anyways.
All I know are the swear words. Hey, Wiz, I am Groot.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Watch your tongue there.
What did I say?
No, you really don't want to know. It's like really, really bad.
Guys, I'm sorry with how I treated Stitch vs. Rocket upon its announcement. If you haven't seen my reaction video for Killa vs. Misuka, which I'm going to assume that you haven't, this was how I reacted to it.
Boo!
Yeah, it's not that I even hated the matchup, it's just that I wasn't interested. And that reason especially didn't help itself because I just came off of one of the episodes I was the most excited for. So I was at least hoping that the next time was going to be something interesting. No, that did not happen. But still, that isn't a valid reason to complain. After watching this again though, I'm sorry, I still can't get too into this one. Some call this peak fiction, or at least have this higher on their rankings than I do, but I don't agree with that at all. Calling this your favorite of Season 10 is like calling Wanda vs. Zatanna your favorite of Season 9. Like, yeah, this is a good episode, and that's it, but at least I like it more than Ant-Man vs. Adam now. The analyses are alright, I guess. They're kind of fun at times, and at other times, it's kind of boring. Stitch's analysis sadly wasn't as good as I remembered it being. What I remembered liking about it the most was them covering all of his spin-off material, and I still like that coverage, but like, I kind of wish there was more of it. All that they talked about for him were the anime and him crossing over into different Disney properties, if you want to even count that second one. I was kind of interested with the story coverage, at times anyway. I've only watched some of the first Lilo and Stitch in one of my classes at the end of the 2023 school year, which I did like, but I'm still not too invested into his story because I still haven't seen the other ones. And that especially hurts the story coverage because they speedrun through the plot of the first one, so that's a giant red flag for me. But at times, his analysis overcame that hurdle, such as when they talked about Stitch's family. But listen to my word choice, because at times doesn't mean always. In regards to the Versus stuff, seeing some of the stuff that Junba's other experiments did were cool, but at other times I just didn't care. It was just kind of disengaging at times, and I don't know why. But on the other hand, there was some Versus stuff I did like. I enjoyed hearing about all of the abilities that Stitch has, and it might just have one of the best transitions from story to abilities in this entire season. They work in Wiz's character trait of being a mad scientist, connected that to Junba, and then they talk about all the powers that he was given. I only have a couple of minor complaints. The whole Frontier tangent went on for longer than I wanted to, and Wiz says that Junba's intelligence has been compared to galaxies when we see a quarter box with almost the exact same phrasing. Like, why was that even there? After they talk about Stitch's abilities for a while, they utilize some of the Versus stuff and somehow make a really funny Boomstick ex-wife joke with it. I like how it deviates from the normal ones, with instead of Boomstick making one and Wiz just moves on, Wiz does it and Boomstick is not all okay with it. We discusses some more stuff about Stitch while Boomstick already walked off screen, and the crickets chirping just made it even more funny to me, as did Boomstick swearing at Wiz being the cherry on top. I laughed at a couple of other jokes as well, like our two hosts reacting to some of the stuff that Stitch has done, Wiz calling Stitch the ugliest dog ever lives rent-free in my head, and comparing him to Deadpool was funny as well. His analysis does end pretty abruptly though, and I don't like that. But contrary to Stitch's analysis not being as good as I remember it being, Rocket's was better than I remember it being. I still like the former's more, but still. Boomstick singing was a fun way to start off the rundown, but that doesn't mean I don't have any problems with the beginning. And what I'm talking about is that the corner box saying which rocket they were using should have been put here instead of the middle. That here was stellar though, as usual with a comic book analysis. There are some great ones like the rocket face on the Bucky O'Hare intro, and him being hurt by the laser, but I'm astounded by how good the Scaturro of him you see in the background sidebar looks. It looks absolutely seamless, almost as if a professional edited. Oh wait, the Versus stuff isn't as interesting to me as it was in Stitch's, which is a shame. And then there's the jokes and story coverage. I've heard that a lot of people hate how the music is constantly cut, and I can see why, but I don't really mind it. Or at least for Stitches. But once it carried on to Rockets and became more and more frequent, it started to get kind of annoying for me. Not all of these were even necessary either. If they need to be in there that badly, then just put in one in each rundown and call it a day. In order for stuff like that to be funny, then you need to space it out in order to achieve its desired effect. Because otherwise, it just broke the pacing of the rundown, similar to Beast vs. Goliath and Invader vs. Doom. But I still kind of like some of the jokes where they did cut the music, like Wiz describing that one walrus guy and the whole melon popper bit. But none of the jokes in this rundown in general were as good as Boomstick saying a slur in Groot language. Yeah, the jokes peaked in the combatant trailer, that is quite depressing. Also, before I get to my next talking point, just look at the analysis preview titles. Stitch rockets into death battle, Rocket stitches up for a death battle. Come on, that's clever. All that's left to talk about is the story coverage. It's fine, but since they weren't using the version of him from somehow the only good MCU movie in 2023, I wasn't going to be as engaged. Also, going off script for a second, but I watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 last night. It is, like, so amazing. One of my favorite Marvel movies. It still holds up, like, even with, like, some of the classic lame MCU jokes. But anyway, and for his character discussion, I liked how it said his life in prison changed him as a person. That was interesting to learn about. Wiz calling him a wisecracking son of a bitch seems kind of like an insult, but isn't the worst thing in the world. At least he didn't say he has an irritating personality. Cough, 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 cough. Now for the fight, and this is why the episode got as high as it did. In my opinion, at least, I'd say that this is a more flawed episode than Ant-Man vs. Adam. That one had better analyses, and a fight that allowed for more interesting exchanges of abilities. So why do I have this fight higher than it? Because this fight is just one of the funnest ones to watch this entire season, only being out by Scooby vs. Courage. I'll talk about that one later though, because right now I have to talk about everything else first. I love the visuals here. Space Hawaii seems like the perfect place for the fight to happen, and it just looks so good. You can even see the whole thing with this one wide shot near the start, and I like how there's an umbrella in the volcano. Okay, that was cute. And also a totally unimportant comet passes by. It meshes important segments from both series and makes it feel like an official crossover more than anything. What also does that is the track, Jailhouse Rocket. Elvis is important to the Lilo and Stitch series, Star-Lord loves old music, and it even adds to the atmosphere a little bit too. I didn't really like it too much at first, but after giving it a listen again, it has grown on me. Only a little bit though. The setup works fine enough, Stitch getting shot out of the volcano was funny, and since he destroyed Rocket's ship, it gives a perfect reason to start the fight. Sure, it would have been nice to see what exactly shot Stitch out of the volcano, but it wasn't necessary, so it wasn't hurting anyone. This is also the first time we get to see the sprites on full display, and they're both really well done. Stitch's looks good, but since it's primarily just one shade of color, it isn't as good as Rocket's. This is definitely my favorite custom sprite of the season. Not too much competition given how many sprite fights there were, but hey, at least it's the best at something. It's nice to see how different it looks compared to the MCU Rocket, and I think I might like his design in this fight better. But even with the different design aside, I'm glad that Rocket still sounds and acts like Rocket. Guardians Volume 3 got me very attached to him, so I at least wanted to see his character done right. Because I liked him way more than I ever liked Stitch. And that's exactly what happened. Stitch on the other hand doesn't get to shine as much with his lines because he can't speak a coherent sentence, but he's still the same chaotic goofball I know. Alright, so add together one character portrayal that I love and another that I just like, and we have a recipe for some really fun character interactions. Like this first one, for example. After Stitch crashes into the Milano, Rocket swears at him. The word actually being the real deal would have made it way funnier, but since they're technically both Disney characters, so I guess it makes sense. There are some other ones too that are just so funny. There's just no other word to describe it. I laughed at all of the interactions they had. That's right, all of them. Such as Stitch saying a yo mama joke, him trying to spit on Rocket, and the line that Rocket says directly after, him screaming while on fire after this godlike hand-drawn close-up, his expression after he had butted the Rocket, and the big one, him saying a swear word so bad that instead of Rocket being offended, he just got so disgusted that he decides to fucking kill him right there and then. But there's more to this sequence than it seems. I haven't heard people talking about this for some reason, but will you believe it if there was a reference put in here? You might think that Stitch said Miga Nala Quista just for the hell of it. No, I will not apologize for saying that, by the way, and I definitely wouldn't blame you for thinking that. But look at what clip they use at the beginning of Stitch's analysis. So yeah, best reference to a quote of the season, hands down. The choreography isn't as good as the interactions, but I still like it. The gunfight that they have is solid, and then some necklace that Stitch has breaks. I've never liked that one shot of it breaking. From what I've heard from fans of the series, that necklace is apparently very significant to Lilo and Stitch, but it was just never mentioned in his analysis, so it doesn't have any emotional weight to it. Maybe it would've if I actually knew what it was and what it represented. But anyways, moving on. There are other cool bits of choreography, like Stitch throwing Rocket into the forest, the reference to that one scene from Guardians Volume 2, along with this great wide shot of the explosion, and everything to do with the climax. Rocket has this funny character moment where he gets the drink knocked out of his hand, and then Stitch uses a piece of the Milano to get to him while surfing. I do have problems with the climax, but those don't stop me from still enjoying it. The first one is, Stitch's transformation desperately need more emphasizing. You can barely notice him growing his other pair of arms between him jumping off the piece of the ship and grabbing the missile. I didn't even notice he had 2 pairs of arms until after he was trying to break Rocket's shield, which is admittedly a pretty cool scene. His electric aura, whatever that's supposed to be, it could have also been conveyed better, but I'll live. Then Rocket gets the Thanos Buster, and it kind of goes downhill for like 10 seconds. Rocket says a line that sounds like it came out of Lex vs. Zoom, and then there's the biggest problem, Stitch taking the blast when they literally said it would have killed him in the conclusion. A way to fix this would just be to make it look like Stitch got hit from Rocket's perspective, but actually didn't. Stitch falls into the water to keep the tension, Rocket drops his guard because he thinks he's won, and the rest plays out the same from there. But the death is still amazing. I still like Adam's death more, but second best death is nothing to scoff at. It shows how Stitch can build machines out of junk, him destroying Rocket's remote controller was an amazing showing of how smart he was, and the cut-off swear word will never not be funny to me. Because, let's face it, cutting off the swear word will always be funnier, and I fail to see how it isn't. I like how the explosion results in fireworks, and I've always found it funny how the Ice Cream Man barely dodges the falling debris, and then gets killed immediately afterwards. Though he didn't need to die, shame on you, Liam. The conclusion's fine aside from that one contradictory thing, and that's most of all I have to say about this episode. It might not work well for me as well as other people, but this is a short but fun episode which made for a fun rewatch. If only I realized that sooner. I am still sorry with how I treated this episode initially.
This is a tough case, even for
Martian Manhunter.
Ace Detective.
Ace Detective? Are you stupid or something? More like
Stupid fuck.
Martian Manhunter vs. Silver Surfer is an episode that has grown on me quite a lot, and I am not all a fan with how I treated it before. Similar to Stitch vs. Rocket in a way. Because like Stitch vs. Rocket, I was initially dreading this episode because I wasn't excited about the matchup. We got another Marvel vs. DC episode not too long before this, so did we really need another one almost back to back? It also didn't help that I was burnt out on seeing the two series fight each other, and how it was announced after another episode I was really hyped for. So I was like, ew, another Marvel vs. DC fight? Gross. But unlike Stitch vs. Rocket, I'm not going to apologize for my reaction to this episode, because this is my least favorite matchup in the whole season. The whole being burnt out on seeing either series is a good enough reason not to like it, but there is another. The Cypher Wheel. I didn't realize it initially, but if my most wanted matchup were to be in the season, which I thought it would likely be the Star, given how someone else said that was a possibility. What was this episode's Cypher Wheel symbol? The Star. Then sometime after I stopped the recording, I put 2 and 2 together, and hated the matchup even more. My most wanted matchup lost its spot to a cape shit fight. Even if I didn't have that resentment towards the matchup, it's just that heroes live in space. It wouldn't be that interesting. And with the fight being boring as shit on my first watch, I thought my opinions were pretty justified. I don't think that anymore, but we'll talk about that later because I want to talk about the analyses first. Even on my first watch, I could respect the quality of them, and they're some of the best of this season in my opinion. Or at least Manhunter's was. When I think of good character discussion in comic book episodes, my mind always jumps to his. Hearing about some of his stories and struggles, like him being isolated from his family, even shapeshifting into them to convince himself they're still alive, and having to live with survivors go afterwards, was super heartbreaking and made the storytelling so much more immersive. And when they talk about how John embraces new life and continues to save the planet from a distance, it made me respect him so much more as a character, to the point where I think that Martian Manhunter is just now one of my favorite DC superheroes. The transition between this and all the Versus stuff was also one of the smoothest ones I've ever seen, too. Boom success, if John is super powerful, then imagine how powerful the rest of his race is. And then they talk about his tragic past that I said I loved. Clean. The Versus stuff was also unintrusive. I especially liked how they covered his weakness to fire, and unlike in Phoenix vs. Raven, the Universal feats weren't as boring as shit. And even if they were, it was made up for the two hosts' reaction to what was happening, like him outthinking God, the evil Supermans from different universes, and the calculation for his speed. The other jokes in general were good too. It didn't need to have many because of the serious tone, but surprisingly had some that got a laugh out of me. The community reference was cute, and there was the best joke of the episode with the 30 seconds worth of Boomstick trying to pronounce Mr. M's name. Yeah, I'm just gonna call him Mr. M. Which DC's writer's cat stepped on their keyboard? It's just such a bad name, oh my god. Editing was such a big step up from Phoenix vs. Raven as well. I like the law of the Edson Johns, such as the Roblox guy and Funko Pop calculation, and the red X's appeared when Boomstick says Mr. M's name wrong. Both the rundowns also had neat little transitions where a comic page gets turned, and makes you think why it took this long to get something like that. But Norrin definitely had the better standout edits. There are some funny ones like Death's doormat and this one of his leg hanging off of his board, but what specifically makes me like the edits here more was because of something that John's analysis didn't have. Occasionally Norrin's rundown only, you'll see entire characters cut out from their comic panels, and it just looks so good. Of course, if you look at them for too long, they might seem a bit off, but they're not on screen for that long in the first place, so it's fine. The jokes in his analysis are pretty decent. Again, there aren't too many because of the tone, but there were some that were alright. I mean, what more could he want than Boomstick talking in surfing lingo? Come on. But what makes me love John's analysis way more is that here the story wasn't as interesting. I did like some of it, such as how he dealt with his guilt from the time he offered up a planet full of life, but even if we don't consider how I found it less interesting, I felt like it didn't intertwine as well with the versus portion, leaving me kind of disappointed that it didn't live up to the quality of John's. The versus stuff wasn't as interesting either, but I did like that one thing they mentioned with how he can sense people coming for him before they even leave their homes. I found that kind of funny. But despite it not flowing as well, I still came out of Norrin's rundown with at least some respect for his character. While not one of my favorite Marvel heroes, he still seems like a kind-hearted soul, and his monologues give him a distinct personality. And I liked how they include that as part of his character discussion. There isn't much to say after that, so let's head to the fight. I think it's pretty good. Oh wait, hold on, there's a One Piece ad that I didn't mention? Well, I'm mentioning it now, it's the most based thing I've ever seen in my life. Anyways, now for the fight. Again, I think it's pretty good, but I didn't think that on my first watch. That's because I thought the actual choreography was boring as shit, and that's still kind of true. I don't think that's the right word, it's more like lackluster. It's mainly just a chase scene of John trying to chase down Norrin, or vice versa, and that's not exactly the most interesting. The top-down first-person perspective shots are kind of cool, but doesn't save the fight choreography, sadly. But if you want to talk about good fight choreography, then let me tell you about the middle. After Norrin chases down John for a while, the Alien X scene from Ben vs. Hal happens, but again, John tries to brainwash Norrin or whatever he's doing, and then Norrin has this badass line before finding the real John. It's like a diet version of Sauron's ICU from last season, but even a lessened version of that is still excellent in his own right. John then shoots a laser out of his head, and then has this amazing transformation scene. It gets the scale across perfectly with the size difference of both combatants. Green is my favorite color, and I love the hue that they chose. It looks so well drawn, oh my god. The moon slice is super impactful too. There's an actually good chase scene now. I like how Norrin got hit by the tail, and then just recovered by summoning back his board and freezing the entire dragon. I can't believe I didn't compliment at least the middle part on my first watch, because it was way better than I remember it being. But if we were just looking at the fight choreography, I would not have been able to place the fight as high as it did. Because for every good interaction they have in the middle, there's a beginning chase scene. So, good thing we're not looking at just the fight choreography. The reason I love this fight as much as I did is because of everything else. I love the setup here. It's a standard one, yeah, but more specifically, I love the tone. Despite how many Marvel vs. DC fights there are, this one still manages to be distinct. And in this case, having a film noir aesthetic at the beginning. And since John's secret identity job is a detective, it makes sense. Even the title at the start of the fight adds to the tone as well. Both voice performances are stellar too. No pun intended. Paul Guyot did a great job as Norrin. His lines are good, but I like it especially because his voice is very soothing to listen to. And Kamran Nikad voiced John? Okay, and now his vocal range is even bigger. I know you've heard this somewhere else before, but this is the same guy who voiced Mario and Sephiroth in their episodes. But anyways, Kamran Nikad did good as John too, with his voice being very nice to listen to as well. Mind Over Matter is also way better than I remember, with it being one of my favorite instrumental tracks of this season, even if there are only 6 for some reason. Isn't too special at first, but it complements the ending so well once it gets to that part. So does the overall tone of the fight. No, I'm not talking about the film noir thing this time, I'm talking about something different. I don't know if this is going to make sense or not, but this is one of the only fights in the entire show where I was emotionally invested in both characters. I'm probably using that word wrong, but I still felt their emotions. What I meant by this is when you watch both analyses, you learn about their tragic past, feel bad for them and all that. And since this era of Death Battle thinks of these combatants as characters and not functions, both of their personalities carry over to the animation. In this case, their grief. It gives off the feeling that either combatant has nothing to lose, and even if they win, they gain no satisfaction. It made me actually feel bad for them when the fight got to the climax. Norrin so elongate Bowser's John into the sun with this epic rotating shot, and since the fire is the latter's weakness,
John begins to hyperventilate. It just makes you feel so bad for the guy, especially since he dies. But before that, both of them clash one last time. Norrin has two super amazing lines back to back, and then John links both their minds. Never would I think that an ending to a Cape Shit episode would be this emotionally driven, but I was proven wrong. But when they link both their minds, the setup gets tied back into this. Norrin was never trying to fight John. All he did was run away to buy himself time to find the answer on why they're fighting each other. But he couldn't, and neither could John. It's almost even meta in a way because of how sometimes has to be out of character in order for fights to start. And it felt like the writer was kind of acknowledging that with the setup. This whole narrative is such a nice touch. Norrin has a monologue as he's known to do, they exchange their last words to each other, and John isn't even bitter out to his opponent as he's dying. The solar system then gets swallowed up by the following attack. John has this phenomenal hand-drawn death as he calls out his wife's name before meeting her in the afterlife. Then, the film noir text comes back, and the fight's over. Jesus Christ, what an ending. If only the episode could have stopped there. Because remember in the Phoenix vs. Raven segment where I said that the episode had the weakest conclusion of the season? I take that back actually because I don't remember this one being this bad. Both were unmemorable to me, but while Phoenix vs. Raven was boring, at least it was complex enough to have a compelling argument. This matchup is also complex, but forgot to make a compelling argument. The thing about the mind control resistance was good, but after that, it's just, Silver Surfer has the power cosmic. The end. It's also super short too for some reason, so that didn't help it either. The fight was too, which I also forgot to mention, but that doesn't really bother me. This episode definitely isn't going to be for everyone, and it does have wasted potential. But given the matchup in question, I don't care how many powers they use, because I still hate the matchup because of reasons already stated. But it still overcame that hurdle, and it gave me newfound respect for characters I didn't pay any attention to before, making me love this episode to death in spite of its flaws. And it still is somehow in the bottom 5. But the fact that this is even in the bottom 5 to begin with should show how good the season is if this was one of the weaker showings. Besides, it would not be in the bottom 5 in any other season. It's one of my favorite Marvel vs. DC fights for sure, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon.
Show me monkey, monkey, monkey.
Alright, so now we're out of the bottom 5, and you know that the season is spectacular when every episode from here on out, including this one, is an 8 out of 10. Or at least that's what I wish I could say. Because in reality, this one barely didn't cut because of a certain glaring issue. And if you've seen other people review this episode, you know what issue I'm talking about. But anyways, you've heard the music. I have no idea why I haven't name dropped it yet. You know I'm talking about Frieza vs. Megatron. But I should open this up with, despite barely missing the mark of being an 8 out of 10, Frieza vs. Megatron was probably the episode that surprised me the most this year. I thought it was the most overrated episode of the season, and still do, but it has improved for me, I'll tell you that much. Probably the reason why I didn't care for it a whole lot was because of my stakes in the matchup. I wanted Frieza to be on the show for a while, and since I thought the episode was kind of underwhelming on my first watch, I did not get the appeal behind it. And still don't, like seriously, that episode is not peak fiction, guys. I don't really get the appeal behind the matchup either. Like when I think of Frieza, Megatron isn't really what comes to my mind. And the tagline being, who wins as Goku's nemesis versus Optimus Prime's rival, makes it look like that there wasn't really a whole lot going on. The idea of heartless dictators could work, but from what I've heard in the connections, the episode itself, and from other comments, Megatron is a much deeper character than that. But then again, I like this matchup because I like Frieza, and since Frieza is probably my favorite villain from Dragon Ball, it helped me enjoy his analysis more than most people, I would say. Funnily enough, I don't remember it being this good when I watched it for the first time. I just thought it was pretty standard, but just so happened to prove me wrong. Frieza is basically the embodiment of evil from what I know, aside from that one time he fought alongside Goku in the Tournament of Power, so I wasn't expecting that much of a huge dive into his character or anything, especially because there's not too much to talk about. But what we did get was pretty well written. The way they started his rundown was good, especially with the music choice, and he gets a pretty good ending line as well. But to my surprise, there was more to talk about his character than you might think. There wasn't too much to talk about with his personality, nor did they try to, but the key word here is character, because there are actually some interesting tidbits on how he came to be in the first place. I thought Beerus being inspired by Toriyama's own cat was cute, but the fact that one of the most recognizable villains in all of Shonen was based off of real estate speculators will never not be funny to me. I'm probably going to think of Frieza the next time I see one, aren't I? I really wish they would do stuff like this more with what exactly inspired characters from other series.
But yeah, I guess there was more to him.
More than meets the eye. Oh,
But
wait.
yeah, I guess this would be a good time to talk about the jokes in this rundown. That one clip I just played was a fun way to connect both characters, and I like the constant comparison to Frieza being a real estate speculator, how it says he hates stuffed animals in his background sidebar, epic reference, Boomstick complaining that he forgot to kill a few Saiyans, the cutaway. Yeah, there were a lot of jokes I liked here, which is probably the main reason I liked his analysis so much. Because if those didn't exist, I wouldn't like it at all, because the versus stuff was So you know how every rundown has stats, right? Well, Frieza has that. A lot of them. A little too much, I'd say. In my opinion, what every Death Battle Combat's analysis needs for stats at least, is one attack bonus calculation, a speed calculation, and just like Wiz says, their weapons, armor, and abilities. His analysis technically had 2 AP calcs, and I don't understand why, because why even do a calculation on the weaker feat if you aren't even going to use that as the main one in the first place? Because the main one that they do use is the unwelcome return of the universe destruction feat. Yay, because we really needed that. The same goes for the way they calculate his speed. Did we really need 2 of them? Normally in most other rundowns I would be interested in the certain combat's abilities, but here I really wasn't. But more on that when we get to the fight. At least the universe destruction feat got some new visual ads, and the other ads for Frieza's rundown was pretty good too. Not much to say about them, but I did like them. Megatron's analysis was also great too. It's hard to say if I liked it more than Frieza's because I don't really care about Transformers, but that does mean I know nothing about the series, so I got more out of the story in this rundown. Hearing about the world and politics of Cybertron was just so immersive, my dude. You know how when you see a movie, you sometimes think the villain kind of has a point? Those are my favorite kind of villains, and it leaves you asking the question, was he really the bad guy? That's exactly what they do here, and I came out of the analysis really liking Megatron. It's probably not going to influence me to watch Transformers, but still. That's not even all that there was to his character. They even mentioned how he teamed up with Optimus and saved the universe as an Autobot. You know, the good guys. And yeah, this is the point where I decided that this wasn't really a good matchup, at least thematically, but I will never hold a matchup against an episode. Unless if it's Goku versus Sonic. While his character and story was the highlight of his analysis spree, the jokes weren't far behind either. There are some stinkers, just the amount of times they refer to him as a toy robot, and another Pickle Rick reference, but the rest of the jokes land for me, and were pretty good. I like the use of Batman quote at the beginning of his analysis, Boomstick saying politics alert, the gun tangent, Pickle Rick reference notwithstanding, Boomstick saying,
9 million years to remember why you started fighting in the first place? Would the memory get lost in the cloud?
and got away with the visual gag of Dummy meeting another Dummy and then exploding. But again, there's the versus stuff. It's better than Frieza's rundown because this time I actually give a shit about his abilities, and I can appreciate the writer for putting in a feat of intelligence, even if it didn't mean much in the end. But again, there's the amount of calcs that they put in. At least the weaker calculation for Frieza's rundown can be semi-justified for being kept in, just to show how much stronger he's gone over time. I can't really say that for Megatron. There was multiple speed calculations in there for no reason. Like there was one about the fusion cannon, traveling more than 4,000 times the speed of sound, but then they mentioned how it can keep up with people that move at 1,000 times the speed of light. Just mention the strongest feat and move on. I can understand why they had some of these calculations, but I just wasn't a fan of how much there were. It wasn't at the point where it felt like a Season 7 analysis, but I just didn't like that part of the versus portion, which kind of sucks when the rest of his analysis was that good. But hey, that part wasn't as bad as Frieza's at least, because here I liked learning about some of his abilities. So long story short, both analyses offered some stuff I really liked, and some stuff I really didn't. The good outweighs the bad of course, but that bad stuff prevented me from liking it a lot more. Funny how the fight reflects that. Again, I still don't get the appeal behind it. While people put it a lot higher on the list than here, I just find it as pretty good and not much else. Maybe if the storyboard changes were included, I would have liked it more. Like, you know, how there was an entire part of the climax taken out. There was also another part too that I wish that they included. I did like how Frieza said Planet Cyberweaver during the setup, but what they were originally going to do was he forgot what the planet was, so he asked one of his foot soldiers. And I just found that way funnier than what we got. This is also when we got to hear the voice actors for the first time, and I like the lines that they have for the fight, and the interactions that they have with each other. I also really like Frieza's portrayal, especially because it's a bridged voice actor. Megatron, on the other hand, I like his lines? Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, I hate literally everything about Megatron in this animation. I know that they were using G1 Megatron, they said so in his analysis, but it's not the Megatron I like. I've never watched anything Transformers related, but I used to go to Universal Studios a lot several years ago, and I thought Megatron was really cool on the Transformers ride, which revolved around the movie version, not the G1 version. Because what looks more badass? This or this?
Hey, it's future me editing this video, and putting the track with my audio, and I just realized, when I said this take, I didn't see the trailer for Transformers 1 yet. So, now we have another shitty design for, Megatron. Yeah, that take was written before it came out, and now, like, there's another shitty design. The one for, like, the live action movies is still the best. Changed my mind. But, anyway, back to the video.
But I will say, despite how much I hate his model's design, at least it looks nice. So does Frieza's. And then there's his voice. It sounds so fucking bad. Again, compared to movie Megatron, that other voice sounds way more deeper and way more intimidating. How am I supposed to take the guy that sounds like he smokes 40 packs a day seriously when he talks like that? His actual lines are great, like I said, but we'll get there when we get there. For now, I want to talk about how this fight looks. And it looks really good in my opinion. While I don't get to see that much of Cybertron, it still looks good in the wide shots it's used in. And the effects used on their attacks and transformations also look great. What really sells me here is the lighting. It isn't amazing, except in the climax of course, but makes everything look better than it would otherwise, much like the last Transformers episode. It's not as well lit, I mean nothing's really being the inside of that one ship, but it's not far behind. What also isn't far behind is this track. It's not as good as Wings of Iron, but I would be lying if I said Final Formers was not one of the better vocal tracks of the season. I mean, just listen to the lyrics, dude. When to stop, when to pause, an ego chasing down the gods. Feel the spark inside your heart. Holy shit, it goes so hard. So the lighting isn't as good as Optimus vs. Gundam, the track isn't as good as Optimus vs. Gundam, but other than that, this is unironically a better episode than Optimus vs. Gundam, and that one's also held in high regard. That does mean I also don't like that fight as much as everyone else, but this being better than the grand and elegant choreography in space does mean something in the end. There are so many good scenes, shots, and moments. I like the supernova getting fired back at Frieza, and Megatron deflecting the energy blast was cool. I liked him repeatedly shooting Frieza when he got an opportunity. Frieza punching the Energon mace, even if I wish the initial attack was given more focus. The tank overlooking the Death Ball is genuinely beautiful. Megatron launching himself into the air by shooting the ground was epic. Megatron hiding as a tank and then getting the jump on Frieza was one of my favorite exchanges because of how creative it was. And so is the one where Frieza literally pulls the planet into Megatron, sandwiching him into the Death Ball. It is super good stuff, but not everything. So remember how I said in Frieza's analysis I did not give a shit about his abilities? That actually correlates into the fight, because there are points in the fight where I did not care about what was happening at all, or sometimes outright confused. Like what's hitting him in this shot here? Nova Strike, it just looks like two random effects were added in last minute. Now that I slowed it down a bit, I can see that's Frieza, but they could have slowed it down in the actual fight. And also, if I slow it down, Frieza attacks Megatron from the right, but then after that, Frieza is shown moving from the right again for some reason. Okay, sure. Also, how'd Frieza break out of the panic bubble? Is Megatron able to take people out of it? Because they don't say that in his analysis. I don't really care about the other ability that Frieza uses either. Woo, a death wave, an imprisonment ball, laser eyes, very interesting. But something that I did like Frieza using were his transformations. But the baggage that came with it was that the pacing is absolutely F tier. This is the reason why this isn't an 8 out of 10. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, see the Gohan Frieza transformation scene. If you weren't counting, that was 18 seconds. That's almost 10% of the entire fight. What is especially not helping is when Black Frieza, his next transformation, transforms immediately. So yeah, some of the stuff just happens way too slow or way too fast. Like with the shot of the part of Cybertron being blown up being too dragged out for my liking, and the panic bubble being robbed of its potential by being too short. But before we get into the climax, because there's honestly not much else to talk about after that, I want to talk about the big guy versus little guy dynamic. I'll talk about this in a later episode, but I've heard people talk about it here, and I did want to address it, especially because of how it does actually play a part in the conclusion. The short of it is, the little guy gets in less impactful hits, but gets in more hits in general, and the big guy gets in the more impactful hits, but doesn't get in hits as often. It even works this escalation a bit, because every time Megatron has the upper hand, Frieza has to transform, and that's an aspect of the fight that I really enjoy. I don't know if it's done as well as it is in Black Adam vs. Apocalypse, because that one's a better back and forth, and the big guy, aka Apocalypse, does a better job of taking the hits than Megatron. But this episode has the advantage of the dynamic being more apparent here. But then there's the climax. I already mentioned how beautiful the lighting makes it and the cut storyboard content, but what really makes the whole thing great for me is the acting. We already know that Devil Artemis, the sole animator for this episode by the way, is great in the acting field of animation, but I didn't expect it to be this cool. Megatron might seem like he's about to lose here, but he uses some antimatter and then starts to talk shit with an entire monologue. And just go back to the episode and hear it for yourself. You can see how infuriated Frieza is after that, and that makes it by far my favorite line of the episode, and possibly one of my favorite lines of the entire season. Like, holy shit, dude. The one line where I don't mind Megatron's annoying ass voice. Frieza kind of has a weird line delivery when he transforms, but after that, he gets annihilated by the antimatter, and fun fact, you can see him in the exact same kind of pose when Goku defeated him in the anime. Kind of shame that Black Frieza didn't get to do anything, but I'll live. Oh wait, no, he did do something. He killed Megatron with some death saucers and a fake out that was alright, I guess. Good in the sense that it made it look like Frieza died, but was there really any suspense that Frieza was going to lose this one? Also, when Frieza does the kill, he's shown not to be bleeding, but is then bleeding in the next shot for some reason. The actual death is alright too, I just wish that they added in the touch from the storyboard with how it cut the planet into chunks. And Frieza's line is actually really good. I like the delivery on it. Though why did he say that when he just killed all of the Cybertronians living on the planet? The conclusion is nothing special, but I found it kind of weird how it didn't cut to Wiz and Boomstick after they explained the result. You know, like they always do. But I do like the line that Boomstick says when the KO screen appears. Also, wrong again, Boomstick, it was actually 1 minute and 2 seconds. So, to sum up this unnecessarily long segment, the rundowns and fight had some stuff I loved, and could have easily been higher if not for the many things I also didn't like. If this was in any other modern Death Battle season, this would at least be a spot higher. But since this is season 10, that isn't what's happening. But I at least came out of the episode with a good opinion on it. It got better for me. I like it, but sadly not as much as everyone else. And especially not as much as the other Dragon Ball fight we got this season. But after this placement, we get a massive jump in quality between this episode and the next.
Hands, lightning with my hands, lightning with my hands, lightning with my hands.
What did I say for my reaction video for this episode? That I was afraid that Killer vs. Misako was going to be mid? Well, I thought wrong. But why did I think that in the first place exactly? It was mainly because it was way too coincidental and had the exact same circumstance that Deku vs. Asta had. Another anime episode that I like way more than everyone else. Don't judge me. Well, let's run down the list. One combat being from a series I really love? Check. That same combat being for Digby stomped into the ground by their opponent and low and bold they were? Check. So by default, I would naturally assume that this fight would be mid, because we all know the community's opinion on Deku vs. Asta, right? And yeah, a lot of people consider this episode to be mediocre, and some are even going as far as say that it's their least favorite of the season, which I guess I could see where they're coming from on that first one, but on the other hand, this is my list. Just like some of the other Marvel vs. DC fights this season, it isn't going to stand out that much because again, this is season 10. I don't really think I need to elaborate on that. But honestly, I'm glad it's overshadowed by most of the fights we got that year, since because of that, it has a certain quality that helps build itself its own identity. And that certain quality is that this episode is the most underrated episode of this season by a landslide. You've heard this before already. But as for me, I would even go as far as say that it's one of the most underrated episodes in the entire series. Of course, that does play into personal biases and all that, but even then, I still think that this episode's amazing. And there are even some other people that I've seen who haven't seen either source material and have the same opinion on this episode's quality as I do. I find it even more impressive that I liked it as much as I did, considering how much I had going against it. I was hyped for it, yeah, but Vader vs. Obito or Guts vs. Dimitri didn't have this uphill battle, but I guess I shouldn't find it that surprising. I don't want to focus on the uphill battle that this episode had though, because those qualities aren't what I think of it. Besides, I don't mind it. I like having two nickels, so you won't hear me complaining. Killa vs. Misaka, for me at least, is one of those episodes where it's an unremarkable yet good one objectively speaking, but since I've watched both series, it boosted a lot higher for me. If you couldn't tell already, I adore this matchup. Hunter x Hunter, while not one of my favorite series I've watched, is still a fun anime that I watched a couple years back, and still is one of my favorite anime arcs even to this day. I know Akame could have been a suitable opponent for him, but I feel like his lightning would have made for a more interesting matchup rather than his killing skills. Not to mention, lightning episodes in the past have tended to be really good.
so I'm glad that the team put Misaka as Killua's opponent. But when I first watched this, I never heard of her, so this episode's announcement had me intrigued. Unlike the other people who chose to not watch this episode because Misaka and Tawaru are just so obscure, except no they aren't. But 3 months later, after I finished the anime I was currently watching at the time, I finally decided to watch Tawaru, and yeah, I fucking love that series. It isn't one of my favorites from a story perspective, although to be fair, some of the story is great. It still has a great cast of characters, fun moments, and a tone I really love. The ending kinda sucked though. The last episode literally ended by a character getting cut off mid-sentence. As much as I liked Toma finishing off Gabriel, and the final talk he has with Index, they could have had one more episode to make the ending less abrupt. At least. But since I really love both series, that does mean that both analyses were highlights of the episode to me. Not that the fight was weak, it's great with some flaws I'll talk about later, but it gets overshadowed because of how much I love the rundowns. I could compliment this episode endlessly. I like the lightning effects of both the command surrenders. There's one for you right there, and I haven't even talked about either analysis yet. These two are contenders for my favorite analysis portions that Lousy has ever done, which is no small feat considering the other episodes he's written for. It isn't in the same league as some of them as an overall package, but the fact that it can still hold its own against an episode like Sauron vs. Lich King in some way, that's an achievement right there. Killers one was just so much fun, man. It was a really great nostalgia trip for me because, like I said, I haven't watched Hunter x Hunter in a couple of years. That does mean I forgot some of the characters, like some of the ones in the feat sidebar, but I still remembered all of the main ones. And Wiz and Boopstick name dropping all of them just put such a big smile on my face. What also put a big smile on my face were the jokes. I loved a lot of them in here. The Killua name pun didn't overstay its welcome, I even quite like it contrary to everyone else, and Boomstick making fun of Wiz's improv was funny. How even some of the things that weren't intended as jokes still got a laugh out of me anyway, like playing the block sound effect for no reason, and the bungee gum reference being really hilarious as well as being well implemented. I would name a bunch of other small lines too that got chuck out of me, but if I did then we would literally be here all day. I absolutely love Wiz's characterization in this episode. He's had a couple of other analyses where he's super surprised and is like that one guy from the Charlie Day meme, but here he comes across a guy that I would expect him to be. There is a whole team of researchers for the show, but with the way every episode of the show is framed, it makes it look like Wiz and Boomstick research the characters themselves. Boomstick is a redneck, so he wouldn't be that excited about science, but Wiz would be because he's a scientist. I mean, like, no shit. Also, expect this point to be set in a different ranking, because I am 90% sure I've written these exact same set of sentences before. I just forgot where. But because Wiz is super excited, which doesn't normally happen in other episodes, it makes some scenes a genuine joy to watch. They did in both analyses, but Killua's definitely had the better end of the deal in that regard, because it contributed to one of my favorite cutaways the show has ever done. Not to mention that I really love Boomstick's line delivery of,
He makes lightning!
Kawaii also just wasn't put in there to be funny either. Wiz takes that time in the rundown and puts it to use by talking about how exactly Nen works. It was super engaging considering I didn't remember too much about it, meaning I had to learn it again, and it was just as interesting to learn about here as I did in the anime. Also, it's my favorite power system in any anime I've ever watched, so that's cool too. And getting to see all of the story from the anime being retold was just amazing, and gave me a feeling such few analyses can replicate, like Grey's, Estes, or Deku's as an example. It was a good feeling, obviously. I love how they covered Killua's unhealthy dependency on Gon as part of his character discussion, and sacrificed his time with him in order to protect Alaka. It was really compelling stuff, as well as really compelling to watch. I could say that about his entire analysis, in fact, and I can say the same about Misaka's. Unlike Hunter x Hunter, which I stopped watching once it finished, Tawaru is a series that I'm currently watching, and since I like Tawaru more than Hunter x Hunter, I enjoyed her analysis a little bit better. The editing here was phenomenal, such a big step up from Killua's. He did have some good shots like Rhythm Echo and the stuff that was going on with the Nen diagram, but the lightning effects made here look absolutely beautiful. That wasn't the only editing tricks that looked amazing, because there was also the zoom out of the storm and the cutouts with the characters and the text on screen. I haven't watched all of Tawaru yet, at the time I wrote this at least. I watched the first season of Index and Railgun and halfway through watching Railgun S, and I haven't watched Accelerator either, so obviously there were going to be some spoilers. And yeah, there were some at the tail end, like the people she's beaten as an example, but it didn't really spoil anything too major. There was also her having a crush on Toma, but like, of course she was going to love him. I kind of knew that was going to happen eventually, and I haven't even gotten to that part in the story yet. The only problem with her story that I had was just I didn't like how it flowed near the beginning of her analysis. Wiz and Boomstick only got in a couple of lines and then started discussing her super overpowered abilities, with a drop of a hat. It was basically them saying in advance, hey, Killua's fucked. But I did like hearing them talk about the villains that Misaka has defeated. The ones that I knew about anyway was like Dr. Kiyama and that one girl in the purple robot suit I forgot the name of. They didn't spend too much time talking about her, but seeing them in the sidebars made me happy. that isn't the only sidebar that made me super happy, because oh boy, there's the beginning one. You know how some of the analyses nowadays have certain memes or references that just ooze fan service in the background sidebar? Yeah, if I had to make a tier list out of those, I would definitely put this in S tier, maybe even double S tier if something like that exists. Let's just do a breakdown of this real quick. They put Biri Biri in the AKA tab because Toma calls her Zapper, and that's what Zapper means in Japanese. Okay. They say she likes Gekkoda because of how she literally died to get a toy like that. Okay, ooh. Violin because of the Tokyo Dye Festival. Ooh. They say she hates vending machines. Fuck yes. Anyways, those weren't the only jokes I liked in her analysis, because there was New York Real Estate, Boomstick calling her a level 5 Pokemon, Boomstick calling Accelerator different names, and the cutaway with Wiz nerding out even if it wasn't as good as the one with Kill was. I like them talking about how her relationship with Toma changed over time, and her ending is probably one of my favorites of the season. I only have one very minor problem from each analysis. I wish that they went more in depth with what kind of harms there were, rather than it just being a corner box for Killua, and I wish that they talked about how exactly Misako couldn't harm Toma, even if I found out by the time of this rewatch. The fight could have screwed up a lot, and I think I still might have liked this more than the entirety of Ant-Man vs. Atom. That's how good I thought each analysis was. So let's talk about that fight now. But not before mentioning that they include the Misaka badge fight with her clone in the Preludes footage. Based. I did say that the fight wasn't as good as the rundowns, and that does stand true, but it's not that far behind. Not even bad, it's great, but put a great fight between two analyses featuring series and characters that have a special place in my heart, and the latter is definitely going to win. I'll get all of the problems out of the way first so I can spend the rest of the segment gushing about the fight. The scene where they're riding on the skateboard / piece of rubble feels like dead air. I'm going to go my deathbed and still not understand the yo-yo scene completely. And then there's the sprites. No, not how the sprites look. They look pretty good and I like the style that they're in. But if you've seen this fight, you know the issue at hand already. Every review of this episode that I've seen talks about how some of the sprites are pretty stiff. But to be honest, I didn't really have that issue. It was only an issue once with Misaka's first railgun. Alright, now time for my endless amount of compliments. The first one being how this fight looks. Say what you will about the other ones, but this has by far my favorite background of the season. I don't know why, but I've always loved Bright Cities at Night. And the background here is a bright city at night. I don't think I need to explain why I love this one so much. But what sets this one apart from others like Miles vs. Static or Leo vs. Jason is that just look how detailed this is. I remember seeing the city for the first time and thinking to myself, yeah, I could probably put this as my wallpaper on my computer. There's also the moon shining through the clouds looking amazing, and Heaven's Arena. Okay, good reference. The beginning of the animation is also accompanied by the chillest motif in all of existence. Change of Heart is my first or second favorite instrumental track of the season, and easily being one of my favorite tracks in general. Some Toro's openings and endings are easily some of my favorite ones in any anime because of the digital feeling. This track doesn't have that feeling, until the tail end of the fight at least, but I still love it all the way through. Before I watched Towaru, I thought the sup was insignificant. I just thought it was a generic give this to me kind of sup at first, but now that I have, I know that Misaka fucking loves Gekkoda. She was with a group of kids once trying to get a Gekkoda badge and took hours to get. She just would not quit, and it perfectly matches the setup because, as she says, she's been looking for it all day. The fight when they're out in the streets is amazing too. I love how Killua's character is done here with instead of trying to get out of the way, he just stands there until the literal last second. Killua then says, "Coins, huh? Thanks for the tip," and while the Go reference is kind of forced, it was just so cool that they put it in there in the first place. They both show each other what they're good at their first interaction, and there's this smooth as hell transition into the rhythm echo scene. Misaka then thinks to herself on how to get around it in this really good line too. You know how those monologues that characters have in their heads in certain animes? That's essentially what they do here. It makes sense for Misaka, but I'm glad that they did it for Killua as well. I don't exactly remember him being an expert strategist, but it kind of makes sense because he can get a read on people easily given his training as an assassin. So I'm glad that they did it for both instead of it just being Deku versus Asta again, where they only had one strategizer, where it would be very in character for both to do it. After they strategize, they both get a goal in mind for that part of the fight. Killua has to get in close while Misaka has to keep her distance. I thought it didn't really make sense at first for Misaka because she ended up near Killua once they got to the same building, but then I realized she uses the Iron Sand Tornado to not just attack him, but to keep him at bay well enough for Misaka to again keep her distance. That was a cool detail that I really liked. Even if the yo-yo scene immediately after was kind of confusing like I said, but it did make sense for Killua to be on the same building as her for a time given his goal. Once Killua gets tied up by the yo-yos though, yeah, this is when the fight starts to be amazing. The Godspeed transformation is sick, and so is Killua jumping off of his fallen skateboard to get to Misaka. I cannot put into words how badass that is. I love the delivery of Killua's you don't know when to quit line, and then after that they start to fight on the side of a fucking skyscraper. The skyscraper fight is probably not that good from an objective standpoint, but I still really like it despite how slow and stiff it is. It's essentially a better version of that one bridge fight from Steven vs. Star. After they fight for a little while longer on the skyscraper, Killua ends up knocking her off of the building, which makes sense given how he's better at close range. But this is when the fight ends up going from amazing to godlike. The music stops, which I found to be nice when it synced up to Misaka summoning an Iron Sand Kaiju so strong it almost took the power out. Yes! But the summoning scene isn't the only thing there is to it. The giant is drawn stunningly well, the shot where he destroys the building is super impactful, and then there's this awesome shot with Killua in midair before he summons his aura. By far my favorite shot of the entire fight. But once he does summon his aura, he gets a raw as hell line delivery, destroys the giant with his lightning, and wait, am I having deja vu right now? I don't know. Anyways, but after the giant is destroyed, that leaves Misaka open. Killua moves into kill her with some amazing effects, and then rips out her heart. I said that this was a great fake out when I did my reaction video of this episode, but now that I think about it, it really wasn't. In terms of creativity, it's definitely one of the better ones, I'll give it that. But in terms of the presentation, not at all. You're probably thinking, why am I talking about a fake out right now? Well, I'll answer you by saying, did you really think that Killua was going to win against her? Look at the analyses and you'll see that this was a stomp. So the fake out was more predictable than anything. Let's say that there's a couple of guidelines to making good fake out. Yeah, let's just go with that for now. I can think of two off the top of my head right now. One, give it time to sink in. They did do that here for like a couple of seconds, but that doesn't exactly help much when Reason 2 is in play. I'd argue this one is far more important. Reason 2, make it fake out on a matchup that's actually close. It would be reasonable to assume either one would win, so you don't know how it ends. If that was a stomp and decided to do a fake out, you would just be waiting for Misaka to turn the tables at that point. But the actual killing move is good. I loved how Misaka used the Iron Sand to stop Killua from moving, and then that's how she was able to kill him. I've also seen some people take the next scene the wrong way. Misaka isn't laughing because she just killed someone, no. She's laughing because she got her Gakota coin back. It made her happy, goddammit. Also, she literally looked at the coin before she started laughing. I have no idea how people would take this the wrong way. What also made me happy was the conclusion. They surprisingly had some good edits even in here despite how short it was. My favorite one being their numbers for attack potency clashing. I like the comparison screen having different colors, and Boopsic has one of my favorite end puns of all time. I loved how it was just a normal one at first, but no, he decides to break the flow by working in the Killua pun one more time. Wiz also got to gush about the kill, and it had one of my favorite line deliveries of the episode. This was just such a fun rewatch, man. I don't know what spot this will get on the ranking because this was one of the first ones I had to watch, but if it somehow gets into the bottom half, then it would literally never be in the bottom half in any other season, let me tell you that much. I know that some of this episode is carried by how much I love both series, but even then, this is still a great episode. While it is flawed, it picks up the slack with good analyses without the bias, a fight with a couple of godlike scenes, and stunning, breathtaking visuals. And it's on a level that Deku vs. Asta wishes it could compete with. So, quick disclaimer, after like the minute and 30-second mark on this next segment, the audio for some reason, for the rest of the segment, got super quiet, so I tried to use OBS to fix the volume while I was editing the video, and the audio for what I'm saying does get cut out in a couple of sections, so I just put up text to show what it said because you're not going to be able to hear it. Sorry for the inconvenience, but anyway, on to the next segment.
Who's stronger, him or you?
Sukuna regained all his power. He might cause me a little trouble.
But would you lose?
I would win.
Gojo vs. Makima was an episode that I had no idea what my expectations even were before my rewatch. I always knew that was good, but I was never able to pinpoint how good I thought it was. Basically, there was no consistency. One moment I thought that I liked Killua vs. Misaka slightly more, and the next I thought was my favorite sprite fight of the season. And yes, that was including Bill Cipher vs. Discord. Why do you ask? I was guessing it would be at least a solid 8 out of 10, but I didn't get that. I got a high 8 out of 10. I wanted to bump its score, but I think there was just enough stuff to stop me from doing that. One of them being I just don't have any stakes in this matchup. I think it's a pretty good one, and I like how the more modern day popular animes are Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man finally got on the show. It's just that I haven't watched either anime, though I do plan on watching the former and possibly the latter, and it gave me a good reason to with Gojo's analysis. They build up the world fine enough, the story discussion isn't the greatest. Hell, they don't even really discuss his character too much, but it got me interested for another reason. Most animes have some sort of power system. Naruto has chakra, Hunter x Hunter has Nen, and this one has curses. Learning about that and all the stuff that you can do, such as Zeno's paradox, his domain, reversal red and lapse blue, etc., interested me a lot more than some versus stuff in other rundowns. I wish there was more story coverage like I said, but on the flip side, that means I go in blind when I inevitably watch Jujutsu Kaisen, which isn't a bad thing either, I guess. I think the only bad thing in regards to the versus stuff is that they didn't mention the calc verbally and rather just have it on screen for a few seconds. Makima had this problem too, but I'll get to her analysis in a minute.
I almost forgot to mention the ending here, how I overlooked something as good as that. It mainly consists of blue embers, colored highlights of text, and counts of characters from manga, and all that was cool, but by far my favorite one is Gojo playing with his pen. That looks so cool, oh my god. There's nothing else really to talk about with his rundown, but I did like a lot of the jokes here. Like he needing therapy, Boomstick's cheeky delivery on his alimony payments not arriving, the decent callaway, Wiz laughing like a maniac when he brings up math, and referencing how overpowered Meta Knight was in Brawl. Boomstick says Riz though, so maybe I didn't like the comedy as much as I thought I did. The ending to his analysis was good. Yeah, I think I'm out of stuff to say for Gojo. Makima's analysis was better in some regard and worse in others. It was noticeably longer, but I wouldn't say it's as good. Though I don't think it's bad. The end to her analysis was kind of mixed. I liked Riz referencing that one line that Sand says, but Boomstick's panicked line deliveries don't really work for me. The versus stuff isn't as interesting, but I did like hearing about all the doubles she has and the contract with the Prime Minister's functions. But on the contrary, the story here was a lot more interesting. So basically the opposite qualities that Gojo's analysis had. I liked how they covered Makima's relationship with Denji, and how despite Denji eats her, he still loved her in his own way. It got across her sadistic nature well too, and it shows that with how Wiz and Boomstick covered what she did instead of simply controlling him. Probably my favorite story beat though was when the two hosts reacted to and covered the Chainsaw Man eating the concept of Nazis out of existence. That was strange to hear about, but also cool. The ending was also just as good. It's just not super notable to talk about because it's the same ad for analysis, but if the colors were orange instead of blue. The rest of Makima's analysis isn't just super notable for me either, but I did like some of the jokes, like calling her Light Yagami's future opponent in Season 11, the I hate you specifically line being so stupid that's funny, Boomstick trying to pick up Makima, and the better cutaway of the episode. Well, there's another, but I'll talk about that one in a few minutes. If we're comparing this episode to Killa vs. Misuka, it definitely has the better analyses, because they cover two series that are near and dear to my heart, but this episode definitely has the better fight. But before the fight, there are actually some rules unique for this fight that the writers chose to include in the prelude, and I like that a lot. It just went to show how complex this is, and it stands out even more because there's nothing like this in any other episode this season. Hell, I don't even think they've done anything like this since Season 2. Anyways, this fight goes so hard, dude. The first thing you see is that there is an instant report which is apparently seen in Jujutsu Kaisen, so already there's a pretty good reference right off the bat. You might think that's the only reference within the setup, but you'd be surprised with how many of the team managed to fit in. Even the setup location itself is a reference. Makima is eating popcorn in the movie theater, which is apparently a reference to a movie date with Denji. They even reference some of the stuff that isn't even from the two series by putting Chosen Undead, Darth Vader, Guts, and Alex Mercer in there, and they even have her watch what's likely the most flawlessly animated episode that Death Bell has ever produced. Within the first 20 seconds, you can see that this fight lives and breathes fan service. While that is final, it isn't my favorite part of the setup. That honor would go to Gojo. Not just in the setup, his characterization throughout the entire fight is one of my favorite parts of the whole animation. It's a lot like Booster Gold in that regard. You either just fucks with Makima like at the start by obnoxiously chewing his popcorn, or the Womp Womp exchange, or just never takes the fight seriously given his body language, and this one hand-drawn shot of him just relaxing as he falls several hundred feet down a building. Which brings me to my next talking point, the hand-drawn stuff. Remember in Mob vs. Tatsumaki where it was technically a sprite battle, but kept switching to hand-drawn every now and then? That's exactly what this fight does. It does it even better this time because it's mostly consistent. Whereas in that fight, I could definitely tell that there are different art styles being used, and here I only saw that once. My favorite close-ups are when Makima said no talking during the movie, the aforementioned shot of Gojo relaxing in the air, the Fox Devil, and Gojo's pose and firing his reversal red. You could make the argument that there are too many hand-drawn close-ups, as I've seen a couple people say that they should be used less and or highlight shots of a fight better, not just willy-nilly. I can totally see where they're coming from, but I like the abundance here. It makes it more dynamic than just using sprites no matter if they're using our existing sprite sheets or just making their own custom rigs. But when they did use the custom rigs for these sprites, they didn't exactly look the best. That's my only complaint with the visuals though, don't worry. I like the background, the hand-drawn stuff as good as I've said already, but I just don't really like the sprites they use here. It's not to do with how they look, but with how they move. You'll see me bring up this issue when my Season 8 ranking is released. I'm going to give it a name here for the sake of it. This applies more to Gojo than Makima, but the sprites here have what I like to call the Korra problem. It's when the puppet rigging is good, but it's at the point where it's too good. They feel like puppets more than the actual people with the way their individual limbs are animated sometimes. Like Gojo kicking the zombies as he's falling and looking awkwardly animated in general, the hand movements he makes when he uses Lapse Blue, that one jump he does when he's in the fire, and that one hand movement that he uses to pull Makima. With the way I'm presenting this whole problem, you might not know what the fuck I'm talking about, but long story short is that some of the movements look off, and the reason that's like that is probably came down to how the sprites were designed. And if you couldn't tell by the name I gave this, Korra had this exact same problem. But what doesn't have any problems is the rest of the fight because it is pretty damn good. They have some great exchanges, throwing out a lot of abilities, which is always nice to see. Makima in particular gets to use a bunch for doubles, even when the fight barely exceeds the 2.5 minute mark, which I find to be pretty impressive. One of these exchanges of abilities though involve Limitless, and I think it's pretty funny. Makima tries to swing her sword to kill Gojo, but the pretty well conveyed Limitless is stopping her from doing that. Her sword mysteriously changes positions. Wait, what? Gojo kills her with that funny line he delivers though, and then this happens. Okay, so remember how I ended up talking about Makima's analysis, saying that I had one more joke left to cover? That is this joke. When they talked about Makima's ability to transfer over damage, Boomstick made a joke along the lines of, "Hey, what if Makima died and you were taking a shit when that damage was transferred to you? That would suck, am I right?" That was actually used as foreshadowing to this poor guy dying, and I find that funnier than the actual joke itself. There are even more references on this guy's newspaper, like Galactic Unicorn for example. I wonder what that could possibly mean. What I didn't like about the scene though was that the team had to add the sound effect of the shit dropping in the toilet. That's just disgusting. But after that, they probably had my favorite exchange of the whole fight. Makima says how she could have died while throwing in Gojo at the same time. He brags about how he's the strongest so he won't die so easily. And then Makima has the badass "we'll be sure to put it on your tombstone" line, which is probably my favorite line in the animation. This is happening next to Knives Inc. 2, which is another reference, but this time to Dio vs. Alucard. They even had Dragon Slayer in there that time, and also that one hammer weapon Chosen Undead used. Oh yeah, there's a CVS 2, I guess, but that's not as cool. After that, there's Gojo without his blindfold for some reason dealing with the chain, and the chain shot is my favorite shot in the fight despite Makima's kind of weird posing. Notice how many times I said the word favorite during the last like 10 sentences. Yeah, this middle part of the fight was really that good. After that, there's Gojo's Limitless at its work again as the weapons are thrown towards him, Gojo teleporting to the sky and Makima doing the Quiet Coyote, and there's that one devil who's spraying fire as the chorus kicks in and syncs up with the track. Hey, look at that, a totally natural segue into talking about the track. I like it, but despite that and how it syncs up with the fight pretty well, Who Wears the Crown is unfitting. You'll probably hear me bitch about this in the outro, but there were so many goddamn vocal tracks this season. I do like vocal tracks, and to be fair, I like the vocals here, but did there really need to be 10 out of 16? I can only hear Brandon yell so much before I just get tired of it. Some were fitting, yeah, but in this case, it wasn't. And if you hear the track during the parts where there are no vocals, there's a lot of Eastern influence, which makes sense given the locations their story takes place in. Japan. It would have been a lot better without the vocals, and the only reason I can see having them in was if both animes have a lot of vocal tracks in them. Otherwise, they are kind of pointless. You can even hear an instrumental version of this track in the conclusion, and let's be real, that version goes way harder. This is probably the one fight of the season that was just plain robbed of getting the instrumental track. But skipping ahead a little bit, the climax is pretty good. Makima bangs Gojo. Makima uses her bang attack on Gojo, and this one individual scene is just amazing by how much time it's given to sink in, and even the music cuts out. Makima then keeps using her bang attack on Gojo, and then she goes in for the kill with this gruesome but well-drawn shot of having a chain stuck in Gojo's head. Which doesn't really make sense though because of Limitless, but okay I guess. Makima then says a raw line to Gojo telling him to play Dynamo, and you can even see a hand-drawn shot of her laughing, which I find to be pretty cool. But come on, it's a death bout, you know that Gojo isn't gonna die even if he looks like he's about to lose. So after that, Gojo has a god-tier response. The shot of his wound healing was my real favorite hand-drawn close-up, I just couldn't mention it yet. And the whole domain expansion thing isn't even my favorite line of the fight, but it is hands down my favorite line delivery. It literally gives me chills. After that, Gojo has basically won, and he kills Makima with a hollow purple. Their screams are just so satisfying to hear given how much a horrible person they said she was in her analysis. And then it ends off with another Jujutsu Kaisen incident report. You'll love to see it. But it doesn't stop there, because after that there's my favorite conclusion of the season. It's super in-depth and even delivered on some points that I never even considered on my first watch. All I knew that was Gojo was stronger, Makima was faster, and Gojo couldn't be hit because of Limitless. They even said some stuff like Makima's bang attack could bypass Limitless because it wasn't a projectile, and Gojo could have ended up killing himself with one of his attacks. The whole tangent on Gojo's domain expansion and how it countered Makima's deal with the Prime Minister was also interesting too. It is the antithesis to the phrase, complex matchups have weak conclusions. But for such a complex matchup, why wasn't the fight given a longer runtime? That is my one last gripe with the fight and is probably what's stopping me from bumping its score up. I'm not discrediting the fight because it was short, it just kind of rushed through some stuff and ended up being at the climax in no time. This animation should have had a runtime as long as Bill Cipher versus Discord if they could do so many things. They have all the interactions they needed, but I just simply wanted a few more in order to get to the climax more naturally. But that doesn't stop me from loving this episode. I put it above Killua vs. Misuka for a reason. I think the fight is still phenomenal regardless of its runtime, and it is the better one on a technical level. Even with how much I like Killua vs. Misuka, it wouldn't feel right putting that one above this one. It's the objectively better anime episode, like I said, and even if that wasn't true, I still like it more anyway.
I don't know what's lame, are your fans or your special effects?
Wait. No, I'm sorry, I can't do 8 other segments. I've edited this for 4 months, and I'm only halfway through the video. I'm ending it here. I'm glad you enjoyed the first part. Anyway, I'm gonna play the outro now, and you can see whatever number 8 is, in a couple of months. So that was the first part of the Season 10 ranking, and if you made it through to the end of the video, give yourself a pat on the back. If you can't tell yet, I am going off script for this part. Thank you for watching this, like, genuinely, I have put so much work into this. Thank you for watching it. And I probably won't release part 2 until, like, I don't even know, like, maybe January or February, because while this was fun to make, and I like how most of it turned out, it is just so draining. Like, I can't. Like, I can't do this much work for my first editing project. Like, holy shit. But I did, and that's part 1 done. Let me know how you feel about my opinions and what your Season 10 ranking is in the comments down below. Thank you for watching again. Wait, I did say I'm not going to post the part 2 ranking until a couple of months, but, like, I just want to do some other stuff too. Like, that's why I'm doing it, kind of like, for example, I want to finish writing the Season 7 ranking script before the end of the year, and also scripts for potentially other videos. So, while I do want to finish editing part 2 at some point, it won't be a priority once this is released. But, I'm glad you finished watching the video, hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you want to see more projects like this, feel free to like and subscribe. I don't know when I'm releasing this, but if everything goes right, my reaction to Bowser vs. Eggman will be available on Sunday at 6 o'clock, because I think I'm planning this to be but anyway, I've been rambling on for too long. I'm glad you enjoyed, and see ya.